breakout prospects of the American League. Let's talk about it.
You are Locked On MLB Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on in to Locked On MLB Prospects, your home for all things minor league baseball. I'm your host, Lindsay Crosby, freelance baseball writer and podcaster, and thank you for making this your first listen every single day. We're probably part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. And today's episode is made possible by our friends at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. So, continuation of yesterday's show, we talked about the breakout prospects for every organization in the National League yesterday. Today, we're going to do the American League, and we're going to start in the American League East. Some of these guys, we've talked about at length. The Tampa Bay Rays, their breakout prospect, it's got to be Junior Caminero. Xavier Isaac's a close second. He was a first-round pick, though. We knew how good he was. Junior Caminero was a top 10 prospect in all of baseball. So, Junior Caminero, but we've talked about him plenty on this show, especially with me calling a week of their games for AA Montgomery. For the Orioles, this one was tough because the urge is to say, oh, it's Jackson Holliday. But Jackson Holliday was drafted number 1 overall. It's the number 1 player drafted in last year's draft. We knew he was going to be good. Did we know he would advance this far in his first season? We did not, but we knew he was going to be really good. Samuel Basallo was also an option here. I thought about that as well. But ultimately, we ended up going with Coby Mayo. We've talked about him plenty as well, and one of those guys where they're going to have to figure out how to get him into that lineup next season. But sitting there in AAA, absolutely mashing. Coby Mayo is our breakout prospect for the Orioles. For the Red Sox, a guy that we've led off the show, he was the thumbnail last week, Roman Anthony, the outfielder out of high school in Florida. Really great year. We'll link that one up here in the corner so you can go watch that because, again, we led off the show with him one day last week. For the Blue Jays, third baseman Davis Schneider is a guy that we haven't really talked about a lot on this show. 28th rounder in 2017. Not an incredibly big guy, 5'9", 190, but came into this year and has just been absolutely mashing, hitting for tons of power, and made it to the bigs. And Matt Chapman hasn't done much outside of his April and May. And Davis Schneider has had a small but great run at the major league level. So 31 games for Davis Schneider in the major leagues. 289, 417, 635. 8 home runs, 19 extra base hits, 20 walks to 37 strikeouts in 31 games. And that power, that 635 slugging is obviously a small sample size, probably not sustainable, but in AAA Buffalo this year in 87 games, he did 275, 416, 553 with 21 home runs and 43 extra base hits. The power is real. It's there. He also walked 72 times in 87 games compared to 86 strikeouts. It's surprising to see it from a package that size. He is 5'9", but he has been very effective and obviously probably has the ability to factor into those plans at the major league level. He can play some left field. He's played a lot of second base. He's played some third this year. So you've got multiple different places you can play him around the diamond. And I actually think he's played more second than third, but either way, Davis Schneider's had a great year. But who I want to talk about is Yankees right-handed pitcher Drew Thorpe. This was surprisingly hard. Richard Fitz has been really good in this system as well, but Drew Thorpe leads the minor leagues in strikeouts. 2022 second rounder out of one of the Cal Polys, San Luis Obispo, I think. Anyway, but 23 starts between high A and double A for Drew Thorpe. 14-2 record, and again, minor league record doesn't matter, but we're still going to recognize when it's an exceptionally good one, right? 14-2, 2.52 ERA, and 139 in the third innings. 182 strikeouts, 11.8 per 9, to 38 walks, 2.5 per 9, and 13 home runs allowed. And he's really different from a lot of Yankees pitchers because the Yankees are big fastball slider guys, right? We've talked about the Yankee style slider that they teach a lot of their pitching prospects. And he throws both a gyro slider and a sweeper, which I love when guys throw both of those pitches because they do different things. The gyro slider is a vertical breaking pitch, whereas the sweeper obviously is mostly horizontal, but he gets by because his changeup is so exceptional, right? The changeup is really good, and he does it without great velocities. When you're trying to figure out effectiveness for a pitcher, you can look at the velocity, the movement, and the release, and you got to have two of the three. And I talk about the velocity and the movement a lot because you can see those on video. You can quantify that with whether it's a radar gun on the fastball and things like that. The release point, so let's talk about why that's important, okay? So the release point matters because of what you're ultimately trying to do with your fastball. We've talked before about how the best fastballs have that really good carry up in the zone, the induced vertical break. They have enough spin where it feels like they defy gravity a bit. And the idea there is a hitter instinctively thinks it's going to be lower in the zone than it actually is. It doesn't drop as much as they expect it to because of how it's spinning and counteracting gravity. But the other part of the effectiveness of the fastball comes back to the approach angle to the plate. So when you have a low release point and you have a lot of induced vertical break, a lot of backspin on the ball, what you end up doing is you make it hard to get quality contact on the pitch. You'll remember a barrel is a combination of exit velocity and launch angle that is optimal towards hitting a home run. If you release the pitch from a lower release point and it has a lot of that induced vertical break, it has a lot of that backspin, then what happens is the ball comes in flat. If somebody is giving a home run swing, an uppercut swing that's angled towards getting a barrel, the ball and the bat are on different planes. And so it's harder to time it right to get where the two pitches intersect and get the home run. If you release it from a really high release point and it drops more than a typical fastball would, then what happens is it's spending more time coming in towards the plate at the same angle that the hitter is trying to hit it back out. So it ends up being on the same plane as the bat. And so look at a pitcher's effectiveness. You look at the velocity, you look at the movement, you look at the release. You've got to have two of those. Drew Thorpe's throwing in the low 90s on the fastball. He doesn't have the velocity, but he has the movement as far as what his pitches do. The changeup has the drop, the gyro slider, the sweeper. He throws a cutter as well. And then he's got the release, the combination of release point and spin on the ball to give him a flat approach angle. Now, I'm guilty on this show. I so often talk about the velocity and the movement, but I don't talk about the release. And it's just one of those, unless you have StatCast access, we don't have the release point of these pitches. You'd have to go off of what's on video and guess that it looks like it's good, or if a scouting report from somebody who does have that info talks about it. But at the end of the day, Drew Thorpe doesn't have overpowering velocity. He's got some room to add some more. He's got okay velocity, but he's got great location. He's got great sequencing, and then his pitches combine the movement and the lower release point that gives him a flat approach angle that makes them harder to barrel up. So that's why he's been so effective. He's currently on the injured list. The season's going to end. He's not going to get a chance to pitch anymore, but it's not expected to be anything long-term. He should be fine, and very promising future for Drew Thorpe. In just a minute, we're going to get to the American League Central, where a couple of these teams actually had some tough decisions to make. We'll do that next, right here on Locked On MLB Prospects. But first, today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Buying tickets to your favorite event should not be stressful, whether it's baseball games, college football games, NFL, concerts, comedy shows, theater, whatever it might be. But Game Time has killer deals on last-minute tickets and the best price guarantee, so you don't have to stress about all of that. You can just start getting excited for the event. The Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less than what you paid on Game Time will credit you 110% of that difference. It is the fastest growing ticketing app in the country for a reason. So snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Now, terms and conditions apply, but create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Okay, so looking at the American League Central, some of these decisions were easy and some of them were not. For the White Sox, once he was healthy, shortstop Colson Montgomery. It lived up to the hype, showed that he can, in fact, play shortstop at the major league level, which is good because Tim Anderson didn't have a great year in Chicago, and so you can easily see how that could work out. For Detroit, third baseman Colt Keith, slam dunk. We talked about him, I think it was a week or two ago. We talked about Detroit's gotten better at developing hitters, but they need to get them to the majors and see how they hold up. For the Guardians, I think it's going to be Juan Brito. He's played at both high A, double A, and triple A this year. 123 games, 271, 374, 436. 14 home runs, 45 extra base hits in 123 games. 73 walks to 86 strikeouts, 6 of 14 on stolen bases. Something where he spent all of last year in single A and then rocketed all the way up. Like I said, just made his debut in triple A on Tuesday, but a guy who's going to factor into that middle infield sooner rather than later for the Cleveland Guardians. For the Kansas City Royals, a guy we've talked about before because I've been a Mason Barnett truther for a while, but right-hand pitcher Mason Barnett. 23 games this year between high A and double A. 6-7 with a 3.30 ERA in 114 and 2/3 innings, 137 strikeouts, so 10.8 per 9, 250 walks, 3.9 per 9, and 5 home runs allowed. Has an arsenal, throws 4 pitches, has a fastball, throws a slider, throws a curveball, throws a changeup, and he has a different 3 things from Drew Thorpe, right? He's got the velocity. He sits mid-90s. He can run that fastball up to about 98 or so. The release point, he's got a really flat vertical approach angle on the fastball, so he's got the velocity and the release. The movement is something that he has to work on. Again, he has a slider and a curveball. They tend to blend together at times. And it's something where I think the slider's fine for the most part. It's the curveball that he has to get better. He has the changeup as well. He needs to throw it more often. He needs to use it more against lefties. Sits in the 80s. That curveball is in the high 70s, so there's plenty of velocity difference in there, and that factors into the velocity as well. It's not just how fast is your fastball, but is your fastball and your changeup, do they have that good separation? Are you in multiple different velocity bands? He is. The curveball, again, the curveball is high 70s, the slider's in the mid 80s, has good bite to it late in the flight of the ball. The changeup is around the same velocity, but moves in a different direction. So he's got the movement, he's got the velocity and release, and he's working on getting the movement better. The thing for Mason Barnett, like I said, he's got to separate the slider and the curveball some more. And then he just has to throw more strikes and less balls. Like I said, he walked 50 batters in 114 and 2/3 innings. So again, 3.9 per 9. But he actually got better when he got to double A versus high A Quad Cities. And this is something where in 2022, he didn't start all season in college. And so he had to adjust to that workload. And we talk about that a lot, about college pitchers having to adjust to pitching one every 5 days. Whereas in college, when you're a starter, you're pitching once a week. You're either a midweek guy, you're pitching Tuesday, or you're pitching one of those 3 weekend days if you're a starter. Mason Barnett moved into the starting rotation partway through his final year at college. And then, so he had to adjust this year to, I am now pitching every 5 days. And so you saw at high A Quad Cities some of that inconsistency come in when he was taking the ball for a second time in that week or whatever. But his numbers at double A, he actually, from an ERA perspective, they were up a little bit. From walks and strikeouts, they were better. So 3.58 ERA in 7 outings in Double-A compared to a 3.18 in High A, but his walk rate went from 4.2 per 9 down to 3.3 per 9, and his strikeout rate went up from 10.3 per 9 to 11.8 per 9. Now, granted, smaller sample size, 7 outings, but still, he got better when he got to Double-A. And he's always been a competitor, like somebody that I covered in college. He's always been a competitor, and so some of this is, it's a bigger challenge. I'm going to step up to it. But either way, did really well, and Mason Barnett absolutely deserves to be Kansas City's breakout prospect of the year, and a guy that you can see in a major league rotation probably as soon as 2025. For the Twins, Junior Severino is going to be our choice. And I know people are like, what about Emmanuel Rodriguez? But we knew he was going to be good. Junior Severino was an international free agent by the Braves. He was one of the guys the Braves had to release when they were sanctioned, back when John Capella ran the organization. So he signed for $1.9 million with the Braves in 2017, and then was released from that and got another $2.5 million to sign with the Twins. And it was one of those things where he's just been around, right? He's not been on top prospect lists for a while. And when he went into the lost 2020 season, he had spent a grand total of 22 games at age 19 in Single A. He comes back in 2021, and it's funny because he finished in Single A Cedar Rapids before the pandemic. After the pandemic and the reorganization, he finishes in High A Cedar Rapids in 2021. They were bumped up a level. But when he came back at age 21, hitting for more power, still dealing with strikeouts, we'll get to that in a second, but the power got a little bit better. He broke slugging into the mid fours. And then this year, 116 games between Double-A and Triple-A, so both Wichita and St. Paul, 274, 354, 548 slug for Junior Severino. 34 home runs, 53 extra base hits, 50 walks to 165 strikeouts. We're getting to that, don't worry. 3 of 7 on stolen bases. So you're looking at the AAA numbers. Remember, on the show, we have access to the StatCast numbers for AAA. We don't have the whole minors, but for AAA, smaller sample, 32 games, but he chases fastballs and he chases off-speed pitches, right? He doesn't chase breaking pitches a ton. It's actually impressive because that's usually what a young hitter will chase is a breaking pitch. And when I say he doesn't chase a ton, his chase rates are above 24% for everything, but he's in the 30s on fastball and off-speed. And both fastballs and off-speeds, he swings over 50% of the time. So he's swinging at those. His swinging strike rate is 17% on everything but fastballs, where it's over 20. So he's swinging and missing on elevated fastballs, and he's swinging and missing on breaking and off-speed and stuff. But for breaking pitches, he recognizes them really well. His swing percentage, 29.4%. So he'll recognize the breaking pitch is not a strike and won't always swing. It's just he misses fastballs up in the zone, which obviously not great. The thing here with Junior Severino, and some of the issue, I guess, going forward, is he's played second base, he's played third base, 62 games at third this year, 20 games at second, 20 games at DH as well. He's not actually been that good at third base, and he's not been that great at second base. Now, defense gets better when you move up through the minors. He's also played some first base in AAA. I think he's played like 14 games at first base in AAA as well. But it's something, where does he play at the next level, right? He had 9 errors in 62 games at third. He had 3 errors in 20 games at second. But when you look at this major league roster, and right now, as of Wednesday afternoon, it feels really easy to say, oh yeah, he can play third because Royce Lewis left the game hurt yesterday and Carlos Correa just went on the IL. But long term, you've got Carlos Correa at short, you've got Royce Lewis at third, you've got, whether second base is Jorge Polanco, Edward Julian, first base, Alex Kirilloff has been there and has done really well. Donovan Solano can play first base. Kyle Farmer's been your backup shortstop and third baseman. It's something, he's not good at any of these positions. It's like Edward Julian, he's not good at any of these positions. you put him at second base because that's where he is the best, but he's the prettiest pig in the pig pen. Like, where do you play him? I don't know where they play him, but he has had a year where he's now going to be on top 30 prospect lists again. And provided you can work out the swing and miss in the zone and the issues with fastballs, which feels like that shouldn't be as hard to fix as issues against off-speed or breaking pitches. Yunior Severino's a guy who could legitimately contribute to this major league team going forward, especially as you have some changes in personnel. In just a minute, we're going to get to the American League West. There's one of these is really surprising, and we'll get to that next right here on Locked On MLB Prospects. But first, today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Snap into action this season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there is no better time to get in on the action. The app is very easy to use, wide range of betting options, spreads, player props, over-unders, all kind of things like that. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season with FanDuel, an official partner of the NFL. Okay, so for the American League West, some of these are going to be pretty straightforward. For the Mariners, Lazaro Montes. We've talked about him before. Baby Yordan, we've called him. Shout out to his Modesto Nuts. I believe they just won all the way through the postseason. Just incredibly dominant team. Shout out there. For the A's, Denzel Clark has had a great year. He is our breakout prospect. For the Angels, Nelson Rada, one of the few guys that didn't get traded, it felt, out of there. For the Astros, third baseman Zach DeZenzo has had a good year. But for the Rangers, a little bit of a different direction here. And it's going to counteract something we said in the first segment about Jackson Holliday. But the breakout prospect in 2023 for the Texas Rangers is Wyatt Langford. And I feel like this requires a little bit of explanation. Wyatt Langford was drafted 73 days ago. He has been a professional baseball player for 73 days. But in those 73 days, this is what Wyatt Langford has done. He's played 40 games between rookie ball, high A, double A, and he made his triple A debut on Tuesday. In those 40 games, 374, 480, 708 slugging percentage for Wyatt Langford. 10 home runs, 27 extra base hits, 30 walks to 28 strikeouts, and 10 of 13 on stolen bases. Outside of rookie ball, Wyatt Langford has not struck out more than he has walked at any level of the minors. Wyatt Langford, in his debut in AAA, goes 4 for 5. He has an infield single where he was running pretty fast. He hit a double that was the 8th hardest ball hit for AAA Round Rock in the entire season, 111.5 miles an hour. And it's just, in the first segment, I talked about Jackson Holliday could not be the breakout prospect for the Orioles because he was the #1 overall pick, and we knew he was this good. Wyatt Langford was the #4 overall pick, which is still, we know he's very good, but he's doing all of this the same year he was drafted. And we throw around the word unprecedented a lot, especially in the last, 6 years of politics and stuff. We throw around the word unprecedented a lot. But Wyatt Langford has had one of the more impressive debuts in professional baseball the year he was drafted that I can remember. And Baseball America did their hot sheet recently talking about the hottest prospects from last week, and Wyatt Langford was #1 for what he did in Double A Frisco. He was like 11 of 22 with 4 home runs. It was nuts. But they talked about Evan Longoria's debut in 2006. The draft was in June, so he played more games. But Langford and Longoria have very surprising numbers, like comparable numbers despite Langford not having as many games as Longoria had. He has 15 doubles, which is as many as Longoria had in 62 games, better batting average, better on base, better slugging percentage, better strikeout to walk rate. Where Longoria has him beat is better home run rate. But it's just, there was a rumor floating around earlier this week about a really surprising call-up that was on the way. It ended up not happening. But I was trying to figure out who it could be. And I said, what if it's Wyatt Langford? I'm like, that's not that surprising. If that tells you anything about how good of a debut Wyatt Langford has had, the fact that a non-Angels team could have potentially called him up in the middle of a playoff chase and we would not have been surprised by it. That's how good of a debut Wyatt Langford has had. I really can't overstate enough how unusual this is. Wyatt Langford is on track to, if he doesn't make the major league roster out of spring training, then to be in AAA to start the year next year and be prepared to be potentially a midseason call-up. And yes, you drafted him number 4 overall. You expect him to be really good. No one expected him to be this good this quickly. It's part of the reason why Jackson Holliday is the number 1 prospect in baseball. Nobody expected Jackson Holliday to be this good this quickly. And as much as I wanted to recognize how good Evan Carter is, or any of these other guys in this system, I can't help but point out Wyatt Langford has done more in just the 40 games that he has played since the draft than some players have done all season. I mean, his slugging percentage at every level has been nuts. He slugged .644 in high A Hickory, and that's the low point. He slugged .762 in Double A. He slugged .846 in rookie ball. Technically not worth talking about what he slugged in AAA. It's 1,000, but it's literally been one game, so we're not going to go into that. But just what Wyatt Langford has done is unprecedented, and we have to acknowledge how unique and great this is. One more show coming up this week. I'm giving the mea culpa on the things I got wrong, and it's not just going to be half an hour of me playing clips of saying people's names wrong. But in the meantime, if you have show ideas, you have questions for Monday's mailbag, tons of ways to get them to us. I'm on Twitter at Crosby Baseball, shows on Twitter at Locked On Farm. You can email us, you can subtext us, you can Discord us, tons of ways, YouTube comments, tons of ways to get them to us. In the meantime, remember, it's always a great time to pay a minor leaguer.